y'all, welcome back. I learned a lot in this video. There's just a lot that I didn't know. So obviously you can tell by the title, we're doing Shel Silverstein today. I spent hours as a kid looking at The Giving Tree, A Light in the Attic, Falling Up, Where the Sidewalk Ends. I looked at those books so many times. I just absolutely loved those as a kid. So when it came time to pick someone new, I was like, I'm going to go Shel Silverstein. And let me just say, I was very, very surprised. I always think that children's book authors were kind of just children's book authors. Not in this case. And of course, I couldn't find my other matching clip for this, so we're just going to do these, okay? And of course, we always have to go over all the housekeeping jargon. So definitely make sure to like and subscribe. I'd love for you to stay around. And liking my video does appease the algorithm gods. So thank you. And if you'd like to check out my own children's books, the link is below, or I think it's here somewhere. Okay, so Shel Silverstein was actually born Sheldon Allen Silverstein. He was born on September 25th in 1930, and he was born in Chicago. He was born to Nathan and Helen, and now Nathan was from Russia, and Helen, she was born here in the US, like she was born in Chicago. So she's like a native Chicagoan. Chicagoan. I like that one better. But her parents were both from Hungary. So she was like first generation American. Now, Shel was actually one of two kids. They only had two kids together. So he did have a younger sister named Sharma. She was born in 1933. Now, the parents, they did run a bakery, but unfortunately this all kind of happened at a very poignant time in American history called the Great Depression. It did not go well for the family when it came to like kind of making a living. And unfortunately, it just was not a good situation. And so the family grew up very, very poor. Now, when Shel was just 7, he started copying the works of Al Cap, which I looked into his stuff. And he was like a cartoonist. And honestly, it reminded me a lot of like the Archie comics that I used to grow up like looking at and like reading and stuff. I loved like the Archie comics. And so he would trace those works. Then by the time he was around like 12 or 14, he said that, you know, in school, he so desperately wanted to be good at like sports or something like that. Because of course he's kind of in that age range where, you know, he's wanting to attract a lady friend. And, but unfortunately he just wasn't physically inclined in that way. So this is when he turned to drawing. And he even says himself, like, he's very glad that he didn't have the influence of like other illustrators around him to like copy. So it kind of forced him to create his own style. And if you've seen his style, you know his style. You could like pick out his illustrations out of a lineup, like right away. I mean, very, very unique style. Very monochromatic. He almost like stretches reality, you know, he kind of plays with reality. It's really fun. I really like his illustration style. Now, his dad, Nathan, we've talked about Nathan, was just a very hardworking man. And so he did not approve or appreciate Shel's quote unquote doodling. Apparently, I did read in a couple other places too that I guess his dad almost kind of ruthlessly kind of mocked him for it. So this just obviously created a strain between the two. Okay, so after he graduated high school, this part I did have to do some digging on because I saw kind of different things everywhere. People were giving me all sorts of different information. So what happened is after high school, he actually went to the University of Illinois. Now, from here is some mixed messages, if you will. So most reports, I would say, said that he left school. He left because one, his grades were just too low. And I think he was just kind of done. And then plus he also got drafted kind of like around the same time period. So that's kind of all happening at the same time. Then there was a couple reports that did say that he was expelled. Now, I tried to do my best in trying to figure out which one's which. It seems to me, I would say that he left on his own volition. He wasn't expelled. That's kind of what the majority of everyone was saying. And the reason that I also kind of come to this conclusion is because later he says himself that, you know, college was just a waste of time. And he would have rather spent his time traveling the world and like meeting new people. So that's how I also come to that conclusion. So then after he leaves University of Illinois, this is in this time period, Okay, he is drafted for the Korean War. He is stationed over in Korea and in Japan, but while he's here, he actually makes a bunch of cartoons, like military-themed cartoons. And all these cartoons were published by Pacific Stars and Stripes, and then they ended up taking all the cartoons and like compiling them together, and it was called Take 10, and the same Pacific Stars and Stripes published that as well. So then he does go on to attend the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, but he doesn't last here very long, and then he ends up moving on to Roosevelt University, which also he doesn't last very long. But while he's here at Roosevelt University, this is like when he has like his first published piece in the Roosevelt Torch, which is like the student newspaper of like Roosevelt University. And then too, while he's back in Chicago, he was working as a hot dog vendor while also trying to submit his works to different like magazines. And then eventually his stuff started appearing in Look magazine, Sports Illustrated, and This Week. And then finally, the country would kind of come to learn of Shel in 1956 when the book, the Take 10 book, was then mass produced. But they did change the title to Grab Your Socks. So that's probably the one that you'd see more of, I'm assuming, nowadays. If like you look this book up, it's going to say Grab Your Socks. Now here's where we get into the really interesting bit. So I had no idea that Shel had close ties with Playboy. Now, I was very interested in this for some reason. I don't know why. But I think this was all kind of happening too, almost at like kind of the origin point of Playboy. So it was kind of a very interesting time. So in 1957, he becomes kind of a lead cartoonist for Playboy. Now, I was interested in knowing why. Because if any of you guys have been watching me for any amount of time, you know that I get very curious and I'm not satisfied with just the story. I want to know why. I want to know how. After doing some digging, the way he got to Playboy was he actually on his own took his portfolio to the Playboy like office. He wanted to like showcase his work because he wanted a job. Now I think it was about a month had gone by and he never heard back. He never heard back from anybody. So he kind of figured that they weren't interested in him at all. So then he went back to the office to go pick up his portfolio. And lo and behold, Hugh Hefner's there. And he actually sees his work and buys it on the spot, gives him a check, and he's hired on. And I did read somewhere too that apparently him and Hugh got along because they had just had a lot of similarities in their life. And including like they were from Chicago and just kind of things like that. They just got along really well, I guess. And I mean, he was with Playboy for quite a while, but this was ultimately kind of what happened. And then supposedly then this is when, so he went and like cashed the check out and he went home and he basically put it down in front of his parents and said like, now I'm making my living like as an illustrator. And that was kind of finally when he was able to kind of fully step away from his own parents. And so what was really fun was that Playboy actually did kind of the whole expose they did with him, I guess if that's what you want to call it, is they ended up traveling him, they like sent him around the world and he would make cartoons about like different interactions and things that he had with people around the world. And they called it Shel Silverstein Visits. And this was eventually compiled together to make a whole list. Here are some places that he went, just like a small list of places that he went. He went to a Pennsylvania naturist community, the Chicago White Sox training camp, San Francisco's Haight-Ashbury. He went to Fire Island, Mexico, London, Paris, Spain, and Africa. In a Swiss village, well, that was like a tongue twister. In a Swiss village, he drew himself complaining, quote, "I'll give them 15 more minutes, and if nobody yodels, I'm going back to the hotel." So then in 2007, this is when a publisher kind of compiled them all together, and they titled it Playboy Silver... Oh my gosh, my friend, I'm doing it again. So they called it Playboy Silversteins Around the World. And there's even a foreword in the book from Hugh Hefner himself. Okay, so pause real quick on Playboy. Never thought I'd say that. You know what? I have said Playboy more in the last 2 minutes than I have in the last 10 years of my life. So also during this time period, because I'm wanting to kind of keep this somewhat like linear, you know? Also during this time period is when he created a cartoon called Now Here's My Plan. And this was like a huge success. So I just wanted to kind of kind of throw this in here because I thought it was kind of an interesting story. Okay, so the cartoon. So he made the cartoon in the 1950s. Now, this would later become the cover of a future book that was published in 1960. But when this cartoon came out, it did create kind of a lot of ripples in the water, if you want to say, because people had a lot of mixed emotions on this cartoon. Now, the cartoon, I think, is funny. I think if you have dark humor, if you appreciate dark humor, you'll think this is funny, okay? This is a massive coping mechanism for people, okay? That's what the dark humor is. So it shows two guys that are shackled by their hands and feet, and they're in like a pit. So there's like no way for them to get out. And the one guy turns to the other guy and says, "Now here's my plan." That's the cartoon. Now, Shel was kind of taken back by like the response on this whole cartoon. Like he said that he was both fascinated, but yet like concerned with the response at it. Like he said that a lot of people thought it was a very pessimistic cartoon, which he said, like, I didn't think it was pessimistic at all. Like it's pretty much trying to find hope, like in a hopeless situation, and just kind of finding the lightheartedness in that whole thing. Again, like I said, it's dark humor. So let me know what you think. Are you a dark humor lover? Do you get it? Did you laugh, or is it just me? Okay, so back to Playboy. So we're back on the Playboy train, okay? So his cartoons ended up showing up in Playboy for quite a while. Like from 1957 when he started all the way up until the mid-70s. Now, one of the features that they did with him actually got kind of expanded into its own book, and this is called Uncle Shelby's Book of ABZs. And again, I was very fascinated by this book. I was like, what is he doing here? So what it is, and you can go online and kind of see some of like the preview pages and things like that. It's basically a book of just kind of like cynical, really bad advice to give to people. And so it's marketed almost like it's supposed to be for kids, but it's really for adults. Like for example, one of the things that he like recommends in the book is to have like termites as pets. So it's just kind of crazy off the wall things like that. So it's mainly geared more towards adults and like an adult humor. Now, I thought that Shel Silverstein was just in books, but I was so surprised. I honestly genuinely did not know that he was also involved with music and movies and things like that. So he has quite an extensive list of songs that he did create in music. He was part of what they called the outlaw country like movement, like music movement, where I guess at the time like country music was just really like tight-laced and very just commercial sounding. And so this movement was to kind of rebel against that and to kind of break that whole mold. What made Shel so great as a songwriter was like his storytelling narrative, but also his ability to incorporate humor in the whole thing. He did go through and make a ton of songs. I was very, very impressed. And he made songs for people like Loretta Lynn, Johnny Cash, and Willie Nelson. And I did read later that he even won a Grammy. I mean, he was nominated for other awards too, but he won a Grammy. And then he even composed music for several films. And people were so surprised too when he was going through and even playing instruments too, like while composing these things. So like he'd play the piano, the sax, the trombone, and what was the last one? And the guitar. So the dude could just like do it all. That's crazy. And here I was in 6th grade trying to play the clarinet. And then he also went on and he wrote more than 100 one-act plays. So also involved in that whole scene, in the whole theater musicale scene. Now you're probably wondering, Kat, you do children's book authors. You're doing deep dives in children's book authors and illustrators. Get to that part. Okay, well, we're here now. See, I've set the whole stage. Now you know. So around in the 60s, around that time period, that's kind of where we're at right now, okay? So Shel had this friend, Tommy. And Tommy had a friend, Ursula, who worked at Harper and Row as an editor. Now, Tommy was trying to convince Shel. I know we have a lot of players right now. Just bear with me, okay? So Tommy was trying to convince Shel, hey, you should do children's books. You could totally do children's books. And Shel was kind of like, I don't really know. I don't know about that. So Shel said that Tommy basically dragged him into Ursula's office, kicking and screaming. I guess this is like kind of where Ursula then kind of got caught up on the whole thing and then also convinced him to do it. She was like, no, you could totally do it. So he was like, okay. So he decided to kind of start his whole hand with children's books. And the first book that he did come out with was, now I know I'm going to butcher this name. I just know it. I don't know. I'm sorry. Laficadio, The Lion Who Shot Back. Now, Shel does reflect back on his kind of business relationship, I guess, with Ursula. And he said that he really appreciated her because she knew when to let an author and illustrator do their thing. So she never really overstepped. Like, she would offer up kind of little revisions and kind of helpful things like that, but she never really fully overstepped. And so that's something that he really enjoyed about her especially. Now, the next book that came out was The Giving Tree. Now, but this has a story within itself. See, this is the rabbit hole that I start to go down, but yet I find so interesting. It's so crazy to me that we have these books that have been on our shelves for so long. We know they're really good sellers. Most of us have them in our houses at home. We enjoy them, but we don't realize that they caused a bunch of problems. Like, we just learned this too with Margaret Wise Brown and Goodnight Moon. Goodnight Moon was very controversial at the time, which was very wild to me. So it's crazy too that there's also issues with The Giving Tree. Now, what happened with The Giving Tree was Shel wrote this book and then he went and took it to Simon & Schuster. He probably took it to other places too. I think he also tried to get it published at different places, but it just didn't really happen. But Simon & Schuster turned down the book for a couple different reasons, and they said it was, one, too sad for a children's book, but then it was too long for adult literature. They kind of thought at the time, these publishers thought that this book was kind of somewhere in between. It didn't really classify as a child's book, but then it didn't really classify as an adult book either. So they just thought that it wasn't going to sell, and then he ultimately got turned down a bunch of times. And so this is when he finally took it to Ursula. And so she ended up getting it published, and they specifically talked about keeping in the ending of the book. The ending of the book is sad. They both felt like it was important to showcase sadness because it does happen, but it's on a level that kids can understand and digest, and it's not just way over the top. So they did feel it important to keep all that in. And even with the schooling that he did do, he never studied poetry. And so he does say that he's kind of glad that he didn't really have anyone to copy, again, his artwork, because he kind of had to come up with his own style of poetry. So if you've kind of read a lot of his stuff, it's very conversational. He can tend to use slang. He'll even throw in a profanity every once in a while. I don't know if he really does that with the kids' books, but it's just very different. It's not a very straight-laced poetry style. So, and there's also a lot of controversy surrounding The Giving Tree as well when it came out. A lot of people have their own interpretations on The Giving Tree and what it represents. Now, let me know below. Because honestly, I was kind of surprised to see different people's reactions to this book because my mind never went there. All the times that I've read this book, as a child and as an adult, my mind has never gone here. So a lot of people thought that it was kind of slanderous towards women. If I say the other word, then I'm going to have to bleep it out, and it's YouTube, and you know what I mean. So they thought that it was basically how women always give and give and give, and men just take and take and take. Now, I never took the book that way. I didn't take it that way. Other people have kind of taken it like a mother's love for a child. I think that's kind of more where mine goes, where it's a relationship where someone is willingly and lovingly sacrificing their own for someone else. And that's how I kind of always took it. But apparently Shel said himself that the book doesn't really represent anything. So that was interesting. He basically said it was just to showcase the givers and the takers. That's basically what it was. That's it. But really anything, when it comes to music or books or things like that, or even art, I think if it's done in a really good way, you leave open enough interpretation for people to make their own connections and kind of be able to draw certain conclusions from it. That's what I think is really nice about it, is because people can because maybe people are kind of coming to those certain conclusions because they've had those unfortunate relationships in their life. So I just think The Giving Tree is kind of like that. So then he does go on to release the A Light in the Attic book, which That was one of the ones that I looked at a lot as a kid. I adore that book. I need to get that book for my kids too. But so this one actually kind of broke a couple different records. So it was actually the first children's book to ever break it onto the New York Times bestseller list. So just with that in itself, he made kind of movements. So that was kind of cool. But then also the book broke records because it stayed on the list for 182 weeks. That's crazy. Now, when it comes to his personal life, I was kind of surprised, but then I wasn't. As I was reading up on him, now he never got married. I have seen a couple places where some people said that he was married to Susan Hastings, which we'll get there in a second. Okay, just give me a second. But most of the time, everything I was looking at, it did not say that they were married. It said that they were in like a relationship together, but they were not married. So I don't think he was ever fully married. And again, the way that I can kind of come to that conclusion on my own is just because of his lifestyle. Like a lot of people said that he was just kind of very nomadic. And again, the way I can also back this up is because he was living on a houseboat for a while. Like he lived on a houseboat in California from 1967 to 1975. I mean, and then later he did own homes. Like he owned like a few homes, like I think in like Martha's Vineyard and Greenwich Village in New York and then Key West, Florida. So like later on he did have homes, but I mean, there was a period of time where he was very just like nomadic. I mean, he was living on a houseboat. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's just not me. That's like too free spirited. I can't do that. I think it'd be fun though. Like I like the idea of that. I like the idea of like adventure and going out and seeing the world. But then my type A side, that just stresses me out. Okay, so back to Susan Hastings. So Shel met this lady, Susan Taylor Hastings, at the Playboy Mansion. And like I said, they never got married, but they did end up having a kid together. Their daughter was born on June 30th of 1970, and her name was, I really hope I don't botch this, I'm so sorry. Her name was Shoshana Jordan Hastings. Now, she lived with the mom. From what I could kind of see, it was the daughter who mainly lived with the mom, and I was very curious as to why. I was like, why? Like, what's really going on here? But honestly, they kind of just said that it was because of his nomadic lifestyle. He was just kind of in and out more, and so Shel just really wasn't around a whole bunch. Now, unfortunately, Susan ended up dying the day before Shoshana's 5th birthday. And then after Susan died, Shoshana didn't go and live with Shel, which I was kind of surprised at. But she got sent to go live with an aunt and an uncle. And again, they kind of go back to Shel's lifestyle. Like it just wasn't conducive to like raising a young child. And then when Shoshana was only 11, she actually suffered a cerebral aneurysm and she died at the age of 11. And so his book, A Light in the Attic, is actually dedicated to her. Gosh darn it, I'm running behind again. I got busy talking. And then later in Key West, Florida, this is when he meets Key West native Sarah Spencer. And apparently she was the one who was like the inspiration behind the song, The Great Conch Train Robbery. Is that what it was? That's the name. I don't know. I've never heard it. And they actually had a son together named Matthew, and he was born on November 10th of 1984. And then Matthew actually went on to become a kind of New York-based songwriter and producer. And then I did read somewhere that he did dedicate his book Falling Up to Matthew. Okay, let me finish this up, and then we'll finish this up. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, it took me a hot minute. So when it came to being a dad, Shel did reflect back on that, and he said that that was kind of one of his biggest regrets of his life was not being a better dad and not being around more. It just kind of seems like he really regretted that kind of nomadic lifestyle. And something else that I thought was kind of interesting was it said that Shel was a, let's just say he liked to make his way around town, if you know what I mean. Like he just wasn't one to settle down into like a relationship. So he apparently had a lot of relations with other women. If you're like picking up what I'm putting down here, you know what I'm saying? People even said too that he also wasn't one to like get very serious into a relationship. So there was an account from someone who said that there was even times where women would kind of get closer to Shel. Like they would start almost like kind of emotionally connecting with him, but then he would kind of like draw this line and be like, not really. But the way he would do it is he would basically say like, let me try to pencil you in. Like, let me add you to the list, you know? So basically to make it sound like you're not the only one. Like, I don't want to like put my ties down here. The last thing that I want to end with is a quote that was from Publishers Weekly. Now, at first I was going to take out like chunks of this quote because there's just chunks that could kind of stand out on their own. But I think as like the whole thing, I think it's like very good as like a whole. So I really enjoy it. So he told Publishers Weekly, "I would hope that people, no matter what age, would find something to identify with in my books. Pick up one and experience a personal sense of discovery. That's great. I think that if you're a creative person, you should just go about your business, do your work, and not care about how it's received. I never read reviews because if you believe the good ones, you have to believe the bad ones too. Not that I don't care about success, I do, but only because it lets me do what I want. I was always prepared for success, but that means I have to be prepared for failure too. I have an ego, I have ideas, I want to be articulate, to communicate but in my own way. People who say they create only for themselves and don't care if they are published, I hate to hear talk like that. If it's good, it's too good not to share. That's the way I feel about my work, so I'll keep on communicating, but only my way. Lots of things I won't do. I won't go on television because who am I talking to? Johnny Carson? The camera? 20 million people I can't see? And I won't give any more interviews." So that's the story of Shel Silverstein. I was very surprised knowing kind of how broad he was, like all the different things that he did. I had no idea. I had no idea about like just the movies and the film and Playboy and all this other stuff. Like for some reason, you know, people get really well known for one thing, and not saying that he's not well known like for his other cartoons and things like that. I think just in today's sense, if you say Shel Silverstein, people kind of immediately think of The Giving Tree, or they think of A Light in the Attic or Falling Up, or, you know, these more kind of just the children's books that he did. And so it's kind of just crazy to see how much of a portfolio a lot of these people tend to have, which has been the case, I think, thus far with everybody. Like, no one has been just in children's books. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe. I'd love to have you stay around, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.